Hi everyone, my name's Joel Stevens. This is the first time I've done any sort of podcasting and just wanted to welcome you all. This is going to be the first of hopefully a weekly occurrence, but yeah, I guess I should tell you a little bit about me. My name's Joel Stevens. I'm a Christian. I'm a follower and lover of Jesus. And a year ago, almost exactly, I started a website called CURATE. It honestly has become nothing over the past year, just because there's life, and I moved from one city to another and resettled twice in the last year or so, from San Diego to now Ventura County. And in that time, the website still existed, and I've been wanting to pour life into it. And the premise of the site is called Curate. Curate is actually something I researched. Funny enough, we use this word in our culture. Curate iTunes, curate Spotify, we curate museums. And what I found, though, was actually that the word curate is someone from a church or a parish who's in care or the cure of souls. And that got me wondering, like, where are those who are in the care or the cure of souls today? And obviously we have pastors. But when we're talking about culture, who are those voices that speak to the culture and kind of navigate it with a prophetic voice that, can turn the tide, if you will, or say, you're going this way, actually, you need to go this way. And for me, as a follower, lover of Jesus, I believe that is the church. But our voice has been very quiet on many, many subjects. But that ultimately, Curate, is where this podcast will find its home. That actually has no storyline for how this podcast came to be. Let's go to there. I have a lot of notes here. Try printing it better. But so, first of all, drinking Copa Vita. Shout out to Copa Vita this morning. Here is their Finca Jasmine. Very good, Clancy. Clancy's the head guy over there doing the roasting. And amazing team, by the way, over there at Copa. Used to work for those guys. So their coffee is awesome. Go check them out, Pasadena. And they actually have 5 locations now, with one just opened again in San Diego area. So if you're down south, go check them out. So how was this idea born? I really just want to use this time to say where this started, where it is currently, and where it's going. Kind of the birthing of why I'm even doing this, because I had asked that question to myself many times. Over the last few months, I thought of doing a podcast and thought that it was also a stupid idea. Who would even want to listen to me? And then the election happened, and Donald Trump was named president, and the world was turned upside down in more ways than one. My personal world was turned upside down when those close to me wondered, how could the church vote for such a man? And while other friends, many friends, also said, this man will be like a Cyrus of old, and he will turn the world for the better. And here I am living in the middle of those two realities of, where is the church when we have not just a political figure, but we have so much going on through the likes of social media, just like this. And we have it being used for good and for bad, that someone can, I was talking to my wife's cousin the other day, and she had asked me, like, how is it that one person can send a tweet, and my economy, being Mexico is where she's from, she's like, one person sends a tweet and my economy crashes for my country. And that's the world we live in. Do I like that world? No. Is there something wrong where 140 character tweet can kill the economy and push the peso to the lowest it's ever been? I don't think that's a healthy place, that we would rely so much, or even as a society give so much to one one person's tweet, and obviously showing their character through that tweet, that it could affect world economies. But that is where we are. And again, coming back to that question, where is the church? And just writing some notes here. There was that big question that we've all heard, where are the Christian voices who don't approve of a womanizing racist bigot who hates Mexicans, who hates Muslims, women? And then if you are for someone like that, do they ultimately get put in the category of you're okay with that attitude because you, say, voted for that man? Or you're not doing anything to stop his bigotry, so you're a willing accomplice to what this man is doing. And I still don't know where the answers to the questions. So a few weeks ago, I was in Mexico City, where my wife was from, and we were headed back to the airport to get back to California about 4 a.m. And I was looking out. I saw the lights that were on the streets that were very bright at 4 a.m. And for some reason, it made me think of my first time abroad, and I was able to go to Russia. And it was in the darkened night that the streets were just as bright as Mexico, or were in Mexico City's morning light. Like this, something about it triggered me to think of just how it brought me to another country and another time. That was like 15 years ago. And I was taking all this in and remembering my travels, and the question raced through my mind, is God big enough to breathe life into Mexico City? And then, into those cities that I visited in Russia, in Thailand, where I've been, and then in the United States. Is God big enough to move on our land, to not side with a candidate or a government or a system or an ideology, but to he himself be present, obviously through us? But time and history and even the Bible has shown us that he shows up sometimes on his own behalf. And could this be a time where he is willing to show up on his own behalf, like in the book of Acts, where things happen that even men and women couldn't control it? And immediately, though, when I asked that question, doubt swept through my heart, because there's a lot going on in our world. But then when I was in that car in that morning, something swelling up in me said, yes, God has to be enough, because he's good, and he has something in store for all the world is facing right now. So then comes the Women's March. There was something I didn't participate in. I love women. I'm married to an amazing woman. But should I have been on those streets? I do in my heart believe activism is something that starts with prayer, but it also needs to take traction on the streets. I believe it's a both and reality. And then would Jesus have been marching? I don't know. I don't know if Jesus would be holding signs of, tearing down leaders or anything like that, but I know he is for women, and the Bible shows us that. And when I searched my heart, that's when I realized this podcast thing could probably be a great place for someone like me to engage in hopeful activism that is rooted in love, prayer, justice, and ultimately Jesus. So the name, The Painful Optimist, actually comes from my wife. That was something that, again, it related to Trump. My wife, myself, my family, we were all trying to process this reality, this world that we live in, that has allowed all this stuff to happen. And in full disclosure, I did not vote for him, but my hope is in Jesus, and there lies my optimism. And that's where my wife said, Joel, she's like, I'm sorry, but you're just a painful optimist. And, I believe God and his kingdom are still advancing. And so therein lies my optimism, I guess. And that's hard for, I guess, a lot of people right now to take it in, to digest that. And here's why. And yeah, the why is the fear, and I'll get to that later. But yeah, so here we are, episode 1, and we're at 10 minutes in, almost 8 minutes in. I don't intend for these to be long, but in doing this, I was wondering, okay, if I'm going to say anything, we all experience the world through a lens. We experience it through a grid, a point of view, if you will. And I knew this idea, the Painful Optimist, it needed a point of view. And so I just began writing some notes. Do we have a Christian perspective? Do we have a cultural perspective? Biblical one, evangelical one, if evangelicalism still exists. What is it that our angle is going to be? And ultimately, I wrote down, what if it's a Jesus perspective? Not that I have these are books of theology behind me, but most of them, are pretty dusty right now. And, do I have that degree? No. That says that I know who Jesus is and my perspective is the right one. But I do know I want to present a perspective, a point of view rooted in Jesus, from a biblical point of view, from a hopeful point of view, from a spirit-filled point of view. And here's what I hope. I'm going to just kind of read a little credo of what I hope the point of view for the Painful Optimist podcast, and from which all other things will flow. Here's the first one. 1, God is good, and he is a good father. 2, God's son Jesus, as written in the Bible and experienced today, is perfect theology. And what do I mean by that? That's just meaning that when we study the actions, the life, the character of the man Christ, we study God. And so from that, I wrote the third thing, that his spirit is active and moving on the earth, and his kingdom has not stopped advancing. And the fourth thing, this is more very optimistic, but also what I feel within myself, is that there's a renaissance of the human spirit that's going to be partnered with God's spirit, and that is upon us right now. And that's something I don't take lightly. I believe that, again, his kingdom's on the move. It's on the earth. He hasn't disappeared. He hasn't left us. But he's up to something. And honestly, I can't really see what he's up to, but I feel it. And there's that scripture that says, do you have eyes to see and ears to hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches? And I'm not saying I have what that I have the eyes to see and you guys don't, or no one else does. But for me, there is something that he is doing in light of him being a good father, him in his goodness, that Jesus is the embodiment of him on the earth, and that his spirit, being spirit-filled, that he's actively wanting us to be filled with boldness, just like in the book of Acts, where they were filled again and again. And from that, it's almost the Renaissance thing for me is like this new wineskin, where he wants to do something new on the earth through us, and he's coming to give us a new wineskin that preserves the old and the new. And that to me is where that Renaissance lies in, that it would invade us in our hearts first and foremost, and from there bring this Renaissance of culture, that just like the Renaissance of old, where arts, entertainment, government, he wants to do something new on the earth through us that looks more like him. And I think the world's asking that. Where is the church? Where is this character of Jesus that supposedly you guys believe in? Where are the voices? Why are you guys so silent? And that's where we are today. Yeah. And from that perspective there, this isn't just about a U.S. thing. I know I keep bringing up Trump, but I do feel like what is happening on the earth, it's global. It's not just the U.S. I believe the nations right now, we're all in a pivotal time. I mean, Brexit in the UK shows this old and new world. Trump, this old America, new America, and God is at work, and he's up to something. And as Paul wrote to the Romans, creation is groaning and waiting for the revealing of the sons and the daughters of God. And all of creation, I believe it's nations, societies, and every other arena, from the arts and politics. They're waiting for us not just to point to Jesus as the hope of the world, but we be the hope of the world in the midst of all that's going on. And the 2000 election season, though, for us here in the United States, it showed the world through social media, through the news, how we have truly placed God. I don't know if he's second, third, 10th on this list, but we have our ideal candidates in power, our ideal progressive policies in place. God is here, and we placed all these other things. We have all these other ideas and opinions that will get us the perfect little world that we exactly want. And then coming out of the election, what it showed me is that along with the United States, the world has revealed really how fearful it is, how fearful we all are of whether it's a man, whether it's a system. And fear has gripped a large majority of the United States these last 2 to 3 months. And we are not experiencing anything short of, you could say it's post-traumatic stress disorder. That we're reeling from a lot of things. And then, you turn on the news, and I look at my phone just this morning, and there's another comment, there's another tweet, there's another rebuttal from another, social media engager that's going to say something bad, and it's this tit for tat. And again, it's like there's a kingdom of heaven at work, and that's where the painful optimism has to come in. Real or warranted fears, if they're real and warranted or not, God's love is the only thing that can cast out fear and remove those fears. And that's that painful optimism, that God is ultimately, in this time, he wants our attention, that he has always wanted it. But I think now more than ever that he's like, you guys, it's not in a Hillary, it's not in a Trump, it's not in leaving the EU, it's not in even this notion of building a wall between nations. Like, our safety does not come from walls. Our safety comes from the one who is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And, so as I finish this up here, I don't want to take too much more time. I'll sometime work out a name for like an ending segment. But, Scripture says faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. And as followers of Jesus, I want to ask us all, like, what is our assignment on the earth? Ultimately is given in Matthew 6:33. Jesus said, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And I was reading Matthew 6 before, the verses 1 to 32, and the whole chapter, Matthew 6, speaks about being righteous and yet humble, speaks of helping the poor, forgiving our neighbors so we can be forgiven. It's instructions how to pray. That's where the whole Our Father, hallowed be your name is right there. It's how to fast. Don't fast like them. Fast this way. It's how do we store our treasures in heaven, because that's where ultimately where the treasure is, our heart is. These heart issues. Having healthy eyes, because healthy eyes allow us to actually see God. And do we serve God or money? And then as it gets closer to that question of or the statement, seek first the kingdom, right before that is the whole line that we've all heard. Or maybe we haven't heard it, but there's the whole line that says, do not worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. And God will clothe us just like the birds. He will feed us just like the birds. And there's this notion of God's goodness right there, that right after that, Jesus says, don't be like the pagans who run after these things. And it's funny because God knows we need those things. He knows I need clothing. He knows I need food. Even Jesus needed food when he was in the desert. And Jesus says, don't be like the pagans. And then he says, but, obviously it's English. I don't know what he said in the Aramaic of that, but there's this but, or instead of these things, because it's like, how do you be righteous, help the poor, forgive, or lest you not be forgiven? How do you pray? How do you keep yourself in line with these things? And if you start worrying, even worrying about how to do these things, you're going to be like the pagans who go after these things without God. And Jesus says, but seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to us. And the American dream is known around the world that if you work hard, you will get clothing, you will have food, you will buy a house, you drive a nice car, you raise a family. And that idea is not just an American dream. It's known around the world as such, but that's what most of us want. We want to be able to take care of our family and clothe our children. And the reality is, there's many of us in the United States, myself included, that we're not fulfilling that dream. And many of us, it seems right now, we're looking everywhere but God. And he's like, I want to be your hope. I want to be your life. I want to be your source of everything. Don't worry about, even don't worry about immigration. Like, those are like, how do we live in a posture that says, God, this is in your hands, and not in apathy and letting things happen. Don't get me wrong. This isn't a time I'm not trying to get into the immigration ban and is it right, is it wrong? But for those wanting walls, we're looking to a system and ultimately an empire to bring us our security. And the whole time God's like, I am your security. Like, a wall's not going to protect you. The wall can be torn down. I'm your security. And the direction Jesus gave was to pursue his kingdom and his righteousness on the earth. And then he says all the other things will be added. So, he also told us how to pray. Your kingdom come, your will be done. And when we lose sight of that direction and that assignment, that's when we lose hope. And I think that's where we're in right now, especially as the church, that we are trying to have a system or an empire or a government or a political figure give us the American dream that we were all promised when we were younger. And the problem is, the worst part of doing those things in the wrong order, if we try to get all the things added and then seek the kingdom after we get that, because it's kind of like Maslow, the hierarchy of needs, that he said that we need the basic things, that we're going to need food, we're going to need clothing, we're going to need shelter, we have family, we have community belonging, and then ultimately we're fully realized, fully actualized. And the kingdom says, no, seek first the kingdom in me. If God is everything, then we seek the one who is actualized in everything, and then all the things will be added. So he actually literally turns that table, the triangular table that we've all seen maybe in school, he flips it upside down, and he says, if you do this one thing and find yourself in me, then everything will be added. And the worst part of going after trying to get those basic needs met without pursuing the kingdom of God is that we not only have not gotten, ultimately, again, we're trying to work hard and do all these things, we're not getting those needs, but we've also lost God at the same time. We've also lost the assignment at the same time to pursue his kingdom. And we've lost it all. And that's where hope ends up being lost in the process. And yeah, my thing is like, beyond, like, I just, we actually didn't really even lose hope. We replaced it by putting it in ourselves and politicians. Let me see here. My brother's talking to me right now. So. Hi, John, if you're out there. He said he can't see it, so not sure what's going on there. But I'm recording it, so we're good. Yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So, here we are. Like, ultimately, we gave up the hope by putting it in politicians, in ourselves, in a system that frankly is the same empire that was in opposition to Jesus and everything he was saying. And this is the painful optimism, that we need to give up the fear by inviting the one who is perfect love to drive it from us. Like, that's where we need to start today as a nation, as a people, as a world, that we need to go to the one who says, God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And we don't have to live like we are all in PTSD going on in our world, letting fear get a grip of us. That even while the president of the United States sends out his daily tweets or we get word of a terrorist attack, that the bottom line for us, for those who profess Christ, is that we need to realize and proclaim, that fear does not hold us, that God is on the move. And even though it seems like we are looking into that mirror, dimly lit, that hazy mirror, unsure of what God is doing, we know he is good and he's up to something. And I'm going to leave us today with 1 Corinthians 3:11-13. And this is the Message version. And it says, "When I was an infant at my mother's breast, I gurgled and cooed like an infant. When I grew up, I left those infant ways for good." And I'll just interject there that I think that's where we are. Like, it's time that we grow up. And we feel like, oh, maybe my mother and my father, they left me and I'm here trying to figure it out on my own. God's like, no, grow up. I'm here. I'm with you. You don't have to fear. He says, we don't see things clearly. This is verse 12. We're squinting in a fog, peering through a mist, but it won't be long before the weather clears and the sun shines bright. We'll see it all then, see it all as clearly as God sees us, knowing him directly as he knows us. But for right now, that's today, until that completeness comes, we have 3 things to do to lean towards that consummation. It says, trust steadily in God, hope unswervingly, love extravagantly. And the best of these 3 is love. And so I leave that with all of us, that we trust in you, God. We have this unswerving hope that says you're in control. And whether, as far as us in the United States, doesn't matter what side we're on, who voted for who, God still wants our heart. He still wants our attention. And if we have fear of how the government could have been, should have been, would have been with our other candidate, the other candidate, then, that is also not the right place to be. That the problem is the world is in a lot of fear, and we are the ones that have the hope of the world. And it's not a time for laughing at protesters. It's not a time for cheering at people who are really in grief. Still, I still meet people who are still in a lot of grief, and we need to be what this verse says, that we show the world that there is a God who is good, that he's for all people. He's for rich and poor. He's for those who have found the American dream and those who are the immigrant trying to reach the American dream. And like it says, the best of all is that we need to love extravagantly. Hope is found when we have that alignment of Matthew 6:33, that we seek first the kingdom every day. That Father in heaven, holy is your name, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And from that place where we align our hearts with that, that's when we get everything. And that's where hope is found. So this is a long ramble. This is the first podcast. Hopefully you get more streamlined in the end. But I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the future. Thanks. Bye, guys.